Okay, so today is just going to be an explanation of what this article is about. I'm going to break down the 4 key arguments within this article, and then you guys are going to be writing in the progression articles in this section here. And if you didn't finish it yesterday, you're going to be finishing off this table. So next Thursday, we're going to look at paragraph writing for this article and introduction writing. And then on Friday, we'll do the introduction for this article, okay? So for this week and next week, we're just looking at this one article. Okay, so I'm not going to read the title. I think you've all got brains. You can read that yourself. If I was annotating this for the first time, say I just saw it for the first time, I would be pulling out my highlighter and I would be making sure that I make note of things like publication. That's a terrible color choice. I'd be making sure I make note of the author and the date, because you need to know that later on. This is great because it tells you who your audience is going to be as well. So the South Australian and Victorian governments have announced, and New South Wales is considering, road user charges on electric vehicles. This policy has drawn scorn from environmental advocates and motor vehicle lobbyists who fear it will slow the uptake of less polluting vehicles. This is setting up for you the argument, all right? This is saying this is why we've got an issue, this is what we're talking about, right? We automatically understand that the contention disagrees with the thought that these taxes are bad with the word but. So it's saying some people believe this, but it's got a lot of power, that one word. From a longer-term transport policy perspective, so he's talking about the long term, a distance-based road user charge on electric vehicles is an important step forward. So we should be, for long term, we need to be making sure that these cars are actually taxed. Now he's going to explain why. Superficially, a charge on electric vehicles use seems misguided. Road sector emissions are the worst contributors to climate change. Electric vehicles powered by clean energy offer the promise of near zero emissions. Again, this is saying why people think the tax is bad, but the word superficially implies that you're only really seeing the surface of the issue. You're not really going deeper. Now, so that's pretty much that first argument there. It's just saying that long term, if we look at the long-term goals of emissions targets, the tax is a good thing. That's all, that entire section there, that's what that's saying. Now, that's the first chunk. The second chunk from this purple line down goes on to discuss a bit about why it's long-term not effective. As both electric vehicle and renewable energy costs decline, we can expect a shift to the full electrification of urban vehicles over the next 30 years. Surely accelerating this transition is an urgent climate task. The downside lies not in the carbon benefits of these vehicles, but in their use for private passenger transport in the congested urban areas, as well as the cost this use imposes on cities. So what he's saying is, we're going to end up, everyone's going to own an electric car really soon, and it's not the carbon we should be looking at, it's the fact that they're going to be everywhere. We're going to end up with congestion. So we're going to end up with just too many cars. As renewable energy becomes cheaper, the marginal cost of every kilometre driven is likely to decline. So as driving becomes cheaper, more of it is likely to occur. So despite the fact that EVs have been introduced to stop emissions, we're just going to end up with people driving more because they think it's more environmentally friendly. More driving means more congestion. All right. Inevitably, that increases the demand for increasingly expensive road projects, such as Sydney's WestConnex or Melbourne's Westgate Tunnel and North East Link. So what he's saying is the environmental impact will actually be felt by infrastructure, not by emissions. All right, so he's shifting the argument to environment argument to cover the fact that it's going to require more roads and wider roads to fit more cars onto. It certainly will run against the recognition in urban plans, such as Plan Melbourne, that we must shift to alternative transport modes. All right. So he's saying it's not really obvious, like they're not going to say it, but we do need to have alternative transport modes. That is the goal. We actually need to move away from cars completely. If we don't have a pricing regime that accounts for the cost of car use in cities, the transition to electric vehicles is likely to work against the wider goals of urban and transport policy. So, aka, we're going to have too many cars in the city. That's what this argument here is about. We're going to have too many cars and we're going to need to build more roads to fit in all the cars. It needs to be recognised that with lower marginal costs, electric vehicles are likely to be used more than conventional cars. That would increase the pressure on urban road capacity. So while the new road user charge of 2.5 cents per kilometre is flat across the time of day or the route driven, this will likely need to change. So he's saying that at the moment they're saying it's 2.5 cents per kilometre you drive that you have to pay tax. But that's not actually feasible or viable in the long term. So he's now going to make a different suggestion. Distance-based road user charges have been politically controversial. That's why we're discussing it. Imposing a tiny charge on a minority vehicle type is an expedient way of introducing a needed reform. Now, those are really key words. That is the language I want you to use to be focusing on. Tiny change implies really not important. Minority vehicle, not everybody has one. Expedient way, a faster way of bringing in something that has to happen. All right, the language is really important in there. Fewer than 1.8% of vehicles in Australia are currently electric or hybrid. But as all cars become electric, distance-based road charges will become an increasingly powerful policy tool. Thanks to advancing telematics, transport planners will eventually be able to impose variable road user charging by time of day and route, similar to ride-hailing companies' surge pricing. We could then apply novel approaches such as cap and trade system. A city could allocate its motorists an annual kilometre quota, which is then traded to create a market for excess urban road use. So what he's saying there is that we can say people should only be allowed to travel a certain amount of kilometres, but they can trade in their kilometres to reduce the congestion on roads. The private car could also be integrated into mobility as a service models. Road users charges could be regressive for people with few alternatives to the car. So people who don't have an option could have like a reduced rate. But telematic tracking could allow for lower charges for less affluent households in dispersed outer suburbs with few other options. So if you can't actually afford it but you need the car, they can reduce the cost that way. By knowing that you don't earn as much, so therefore and you're in the outer suburbs, you don't have a choice, they can reduce the cost. So the point of that is actually to get cars out of the city. Beyond fuel, private cars have high environmental costs in steel, plastic, aluminium, glass and rubber use, and about 1/3 of our increasingly valuable urban space is given over to cars in the form of roads and parking. To reduce this demand on resources and space, car use should be priced to shift travel to and fund more sustainable city-friendly modes such as public transport, walking and cycling. So pretty much what he's saying here is we need to be moving away from cars completely. We could even price the car out of cities completely. So he's saying we shouldn't have cars in the city at all. The most environmentally sustainable car, after all, is no car at all. So this entire article here is broken down into 4 sections. The first point is saying that while the initial reaction to the EV tax is negative, the long-term benefit will outweigh the short-term impact, right? So what he's saying is cars in general are the problem, not just those that have high emissions. Right? So that's his contention. And the second argument here, cars are congesting the city and roads, which will increase demand for more roads, resulting in further negative environmental impact. By making cars more affordable, more people will buy them and use them, thinking they'll not have as much impact on emissions when they use an electric vehicle. All right? And he's saying which is not the case. All right? The third argument is that there should be distance and time-based levies on driving, which is designed about location, time of movement, and socioeconomic standing. So they should actually be introducing a new way of taxing that actually bases it on if you're going to drive at peak hour, you'll get charged at a higher rate, to try and push people to use transport with the aim of encouraging people to use public transport. And the last bit is that cars should not be used in the city at all, and the government should be taking steps to make it financially unviable to own or use a car in the city. All right? So that is the main sections of this article explained to you.